Welcome everyone to the webinar. We are going to be talking about changes to California's rooftop solar rules and how they affect you. I'm Dave Rosenfeld. I'm the director of the Solar Rights Alliance, and with me is Kaylee Underhill.
Hi, folks. My name is Kaylee. I am the new Advocacy and Development Director with the Solar Rights Alliance, and I'm really happy to be here with you tonight.
We're really psyched. Kaylee just joined the staff of the Solar Rights Alliance and has been actually doing work with us for about a year and a half. So is no stranger to the work that we're doing, and you'll get to know her both in this webinar and in the course of the next few months. So the purpose of this webinar is twofold. One is to give you information about the upcoming changes to California's rooftop solar program. These changes can affect, in some cases, people who have solar. We'll get into what those conditions are. And then they definitely affect people who don't have solar but might want it. So we want to make sure you have good information so that you can make choices if that makes sense for you. So that's one thing we're going to do. The other thing we're going to do is we're going to go through just what's the path ahead. What do we need to do to make sure that we continue to defend everyone's right to make energy from the sun without unreasonable interference by the utility, and also, increase the chances that people who want to go solar can without that interference. So we'll talk about that as well, and some of the plans that we have over the next few months, and most importantly, how you can continue to make your voice heard so that these plans are likely to succeed. So that's how we'll do it. Format-wise, in a moment, I'm going to share my screen and I'm going to walk through. I've got a slide deck that I will narrate. I will do a part of this, and then Kaylee will do a part of it. And then after that, we're going to take questions, and questions have come in a variety of ways. Many of you have emailed us questions. Many people pre-submitted questions, and then there's also a Q&A button. You'll see, and I see already some people found it, and you can submit questions there. You will a lot of the questions that you got, I think we're going to answer in the course of the presentation that Kaylee and I are going to make. And then there's a few questions that we've already thought about that we're going to answer as well. We probably won't be able to answer every single question. And so if we don't answer the question that you have by the time this webinar is over, then we invite you to email us at info@solarrights.org, and then we will respond to that question. And we try to respond to every email that comes in. Sometimes that's not always possible, but that's really an important thing for us. And so we will definitely try to prioritize getting back to you for that. This webinar is being recorded. We intend to post it on the Solar Rights Alliance website tomorrow or over the weekend. And we are going to email a link to the recording out to anyone who registered in advance for this webinar. And so I will also include the email address to send us additional questions as well as some additional information. So we'll have all that stuff for you and more, and our goal is to get your questions answered. Okay, so again, I want to thank people for coming on to this webinar, and really thank you for everything that you have done over the last 2 years. It's been really a heck of a last 2 years, and there's good news and there's bad news, and we're going to go through all of that. But first, we want to just make sure you have some good information so that you can protect your investment or make an investment that is going to serve your family and your community well. So with that, I'm going to share my screen, and I'm going to get into things. So just give me a sec here to just do the transition. And if everything is going the way that it is supposed to go, then you all should see something that says changes to California's rooftop solar rules and how they affect you. All right, I got a thumbs up there from Kaylee. So let's get into it then, shall we? First, just a little bit about the Solar Rights Alliance. We are the nonprofit association of California solar users. We believe that you and everybody has the right to make energy from the sun without unreasonable interference from the utility or the government. We keep track of what the politicians and the regulators and the utilities are up to, and then we alert you when there's a threat to your investment or there's an opportunity to expand solar to more people. We are about 100,000 solar users. That's our list, is about 100,000 people in California who have solar. Some people also don't have solar, and we welcome people who don't have solar but want it someday. We have 2 paid staff, myself, the director, and then Kaylee Underhill, the advocacy and development director. And then otherwise, we're completely volunteer driven. And we have lots of people volunteer a lot of their time to help make the organization successful. And then some people just do a little bit or respond to our emails. It's all good. Our board of directors is all solar users in California, just regular people who have solar and want to make a difference. We're not going to play these videos, but I put them on here just to, if you're kind of wondering, okay, who is this organization? What are they about? What motivates them? I invite you to go to the website. There's an about page like most organizations have. And there you can actually watch videos of some of the different people who are involved in the Solar Rights Alliance. And you can get a sense of just who we are and what we're about and all that kind of thing. Okay, so that's about us. I have a couple of disclaimers that I want to just get out up front, which is the information that we're about to go through in this webinar applies to whether you have rooftop solar or ground mount solar. Many of you who are out in rural areas or just have a large property, you've got solar that's mounted onto the ground, or you're a farmer. When you say rooftop solar, really what we mean is rooftop and ground mount solar. We just have to pick a word, and we pick the word that just captures the most number of people. So forgive us if you're ground mount and you're confused. We're talking about you too. We are talking about any kind of solar system, rooftop or ground mount, regardless of how it's been financed. So you might own your system, you might lease it, or you might have a power purchasing agreement or a PPA. This applies to all those kinds of financing arrangements. Everything we're talking about applies to a residential system and also commercial and industrial solar. So that captures nonprofits and churches and schools and farms. You'll hear oftentimes, it seems like we're talking about residential, but really we're talking about all of it. And again, we just kind of have to pick, something to just keep it simple. And so we're talking about you too, if you're that. So just with those disclaimers, then let's get to just some quick definitions. What is NEM 3? I hate acronyms. I try not to use acronyms. I think acronyms are a great way to exclude people from the process. And obviously that's, we want to include people. The CPUC and the utilities would like to exclude people, but that's not us. And so NEM 3, we do have to do some acronyms though here, because you're going to hear them a lot. And we want to make sure that you know what they are. So NEM 3 refers to net energy metering, the 3rd version. Let me explain that a little bit more. It's net energy metering is the program that lets you get compensated for the extra energy that you give back to the grid. That's what the program is called, is net energy metering, or NEM. That's literally what it is. And the rules for net metering are set by the California Public Utilities Commission, which is also known as the CPUC. That's the other acronym we're going to use here, NEM and CPUC. And I think those are the only ones that we use. The CPUC has made or revised the rules on net metering 3 times since the legislature established net metering in the 1990s. And depending on when you got your solar, you're on one of those versions. If you got your solar before 2017, you're on NEM 1. If you got your solar 2017 or later, you're on NEM 2. And then nobody's on NEM 3 yet, but anyone who gets their solar after mid-April of this year is going to be on NEM 3. And so if you currently have solar, you're either on NEM 1 or NEM 2, and usually you know what it is because it's on your utility bill. We can help you make that distinction if you're not sure, but that's some definitions. So who does NEM 3 affect? Well, first off, it covers anyone who is a customer of PG&E, SDG&E, or Edison. And this is the case even if you also subscribe to a local community energy provider. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, then don't worry about it. It doesn't apply to you. But sometimes in some areas, you can opt to buy some or all of your electricity from a local provider. You still are a PG&E or Edison or SDG&E customer, but you also are a customer of this other provider. And this applies regardless of what the arrangement is. NEM 3 does not directly affect, however, customers of local municipally run utilities. For example, if you live in Sacramento, your utility is SMUD. That's locally run. If you live in some parts of LA, LADWP is your utility. NEM 3 does not affect those. At least it doesn't affect it directly. We are worried that NEM 3 will infect some of those utilities, but for now, this does not apply. So let's talk about the way that the system currently works, the way that it works for NEM 1 and NEM 2, because that's the easiest way then to describe what's going to happen with NEM 3. So the way it works right now is your solar panels make energy. And the first thing that happens when those electrons get generated is they power the stuff that you're using in your home right at that moment. The fridge, the AC, the heater, whatever. If at any given point in time, your panels are making more energy than what you are using at that very moment, then that extra energy flows out the wires, it spins your meter backwards, and it goes into the grid. And that's when we talk about surplus energy, that's the process that we're talking about. And then when that happens, the utility takes that extra energy that you just put back into the grid and it sells it to your neighbors. And then it gives you a credit on your utility account that's roughly equal to whatever it is that they sold it to your neighbors for. And I say roughly equal because there's some nuance there, but basically roughly equal, what we call the retail rate. And that credit that then you accumulate offsets the electricity that you buy from the utility when the sun is not shining. And this program, whether it's NEM 1 or NEM 2, you can stay on it for 20 years from the date that your system turned on. That's kind of the basic of NEM 1 and NEM 2. And one just nuance is when we're talking about this, we're talking about the rate that you get for the extra energy that you give back to the grid. We're not talking about the rate that you pay for the energy that you buy from the grid when the sun is not shining. That rate, the utility can change that at any time, and they do. And many of you have experienced that they're putting a lot of people on rates where the evening electricity rates are higher and the daytime electricity rates are lower. They can do that if they want. What they can't change is the idea that you get the retail rate, whatever the rate is at the time that you exported that energy, that you're on that for 20 years. All right, so that's NEM 1 and NEM 2. So here's how NEM 3 will work. And it's complicated, so I'm simplifying it somewhat. We have distributed the actual decision. You can get into the details. And like I said, you can email us if there's more weeds that you want to get into. But in our opinion, this is the most important information for people to know. So for anyone who goes solar after mid-April of 2023, they are going to get 75 to 80% less for that extra solar energy than current solar users. And that's a drop of, I'm talking in averages here, but it's a drop from about 30 cents per kilowatt hour today for NEM 1 and NEM 2 to about 5 cents to kilowatt hour under NEM 3. Now, some solar users under NEM 3 will get a little bit more initially than 5 cents, and then it'll drop to 5 cents. So the first couple of years, it might be 7 or 8 cents. Eventually, it's all going to go down to around 5 cents. So I'm just using 5 cents as the proxy because that's more or less what it's going to be. And no matter which way you cut it, it's an eye-popping drop. I mean, it's just a big, very, very, significant and impactful drop. And in addition, people who are on NEM 3 will be forced onto, they'll have to take service onto a rate plan that has very high evening electricity rates. That's another feature of the NEM 3 is if you want to get even that 5 cents for your extra energy, you got to go on this rate plan where the evening electricity rates are quite expensive. And the lock-in period is only 9 years as compared to 20 years for NEM 1 and NEM 2. All right. And so that's the way NEM 3 works. Oh, sorry, one more thing. So the impact of this is that the payback period for a solar system right now under NEM 1 and NEM 2, a solar system generally makes back the investment in about 6 years. And NEM 3, because that credit for the extra energy goes down so much, that payback period is going to be more than 10 years. And so that's the direct financial impact. I'm talking in averages, but this is pretty much what it'll be. A little bit more about NEM3 that I want to just talk about. The CPUC claims that NEM3 solar users will have access to a battery rebate that will make these changes moot. And I want to address this because you may have seen this in the news, and or you're going to hear this in the news. And what the CPUC argues is going like, because this battery rebate will make it easy for you to get a battery, who cares how much you're getting back for the extra energy that you send back to the grid? You'll be able to store your energy in a battery and then use it when the sun's not shining, so everything is good, right? It's nonsense. And let me just describe to you why. So if somebody is telling you that, you just, it's not right. So first off, that battery rebate is theoretical. The money has not been allocated. The legislature has to allocate it this year. Maybe they will, maybe they won't, but it's not in the can whatsoever. The funds that are being proposed, the way that CPUC has proposed it, they're highly restricted and just won't be available to the majority of people who are out there. So even if the funds do exist, there's a good chance you won't be eligible for it. The amount of money that is being proposed is just too small to make a difference. It's going to disappear in like, a very short period of time. There's not enough to go around. And so that's another thing. And then finally, Governor Newsom has already proposed slashing the suggested amount of this rebate by 1/3. So we're not off to a very good start on this theoretical rebate. So I just would not be betting the farm on this. And so I wanted to address that because you'll hear that being talked about. And already we've been getting a lot of questions. And so I just want to go, I think it's nonsense. All right. There's two things that NEM3 does not do. I want to be really, really clear about this. First, there's no solar tax. We're going to talk later about how big that is. It's big, but there's no solar tax in NEM3. That's a good thing. And then the existing 1.5 million solar users are protected from NEM3 for the duration of their lock-in period, with one exception. And we're going to get into that in just a moment. So if you currently have solar, you do not have to go on NEM3 until your lock-in period is over. So let's get into that. So I want to actually just repeat this just to make sure it's crystal clear. My computer just froze a little bit. So there we go. All right. Give me a sec, folks. So NEM3 does not affect existing solar users on NEM1 or NEM2 for the duration of your lock-in period. And there is one exception, and that is if you add more panels to your existing solar system after NEM3 goes into effect, you will be forced onto NEM3. So let's unpack both of these. So first is, you might be wondering, okay, when does my lock-in period end? Your lock-in period is 20 years from the date that the utility turned your solar system on. Even if you added panels or a battery somewhere down the road, your lock-in date is calculated from the point that your original installation was turned on. So if your original installation was in 2003, and then let's say a couple of years ago, you added more panels or a battery, your lock-in period still is starting in 2003, which means it ends this year. And if you think otherwise, because again, I'm working in rules of thumb and what the published rules are, then you should contact your solar company or call the utility. This is the information we can give you, because this is in the vast majority of cases and what we witness in the experience, how the lock-in period is defined. All right, so what if you have solar and you want to add more panels? In most cases, if you add more panels after NEM3 goes into effect, you're going to get forced onto NEM3. Now, what I mean by most cases is if you add more panels that are either 10% greater than your current system or just amount to 1 kilowatt of more power, that's about 3 or 4 panels, whichever is greater, then it triggers this rule of thumb that I'm talking about. And that's like, I think probably 99% of people that add more panels are going to add more than a kilowatt or more than 10%. So effectively, this is the danger zone. And so if you're on NEM1 or NEM2 now and you want to add more panels and you want to keep your current lock-in period, you should probably add those panels now, get them done now. And so let's talk about what that means. So the CPUC has defined what you have to do to get your stuff done before NEM 3 goes into effect. And so if you want to add more panels, then you have to submit to your utility a complete and correct interconnection application by April 14th. So April 14th is the day where you would have to have a complete and correct interconnection application into the utility. For most people, your solar company is going to do this work. But I want, for posterity's sake, for you to see what it is the solar company has to put in, because you'll probably want to ride them a little bit and just make sure they're doing it right. It cannot hurt to be detail oriented under these circumstances. And we're going to repeat this a lot, but they're going to handle this. Now, if you are doing a DIY project, you're just going to self-install, you're doing this all yourself, you don't have to worry about having a signed contract with a solar provider. You will just note in the application that you're doing the project yourself, and that's fine. But you are then responsible for all of these things. And so that's the case. Now, construction does not have to be done by April 14th. And in fact, the final building permit, you got 3 years to get the final building permit. Presumably you're going to want to get that final building permit done earlier, but I'm just saying you've got time. What has to get done by April 14th of this year is that complete and correct interconnection application has got to be into the utility. And you'll be well served to just get that application in early so that in case there's something wrong with it, you have a chance to resubmit it, work out the kinks and that kind of thing. All right. So what if you have solar and your lock-in period is going to expire soon, right? For some people who are on NEM 1, you're in this zone right now. If your 20-year lock-in period is about to expire, let's say it has expired or it's going to expire this year, or it's going to expire very, very soon. The only way to avoid getting put on NEM 3 is you have to remove all of your panels. You got to remove the current system and you have to replace it with a new one. And in the interconnection application, you have to show evidence like photos that the system has been removed and you put a new one on the roof. And that's the only way to do it. You can't add panels, you can't do anything else. You got to remove the whole system. If you do that, then your lock-in period resets and you've got another 20 years. And I'm going to repeat again what I said before. So then if you want to do this, then by April 14th, same thing. You got to get in a complete and correct interconnection application to your utility, which will include these things that for most of you, your solar company is going to handle. But if you're a DIY person, you're doing it yourself, you will be doing all of these things. And of course, if you are, you don't need a signed contract because you are the solar provider. And again, the construction does not have to be done by April 14th. You just have to get that interconnection application in. And in your case of, in this case, you would also have to show evidence that you have removed the system, the original system from the roof. Okay, so what if you have solar and you want to add a battery? We've been talking about adding panels, but what about a battery? Good news, if you have solar right now, you can add a battery anytime you want without impacting your lock-in period. So you can wait, if you're not ready to add a battery and you're worried, don't worry. You can do it next year, you could do it the year after. It won't force you onto NEM 3. So that's simple and it's good news. All right, what if you have solar and you sell your home? Good news there too. If you're on NEM 1 or NEM 2 and you sell your home, the new owner will take over the remainder of the lock-in period. So the lock-in period follows the system, and so they get the benefit just as if you were living there. On NEM 3, this is not the case. When a NEM 3 solar user sells their home, the smaller lock-in period that they get, that 9-year thing, it expires immediately and starts all over again. So, all right, so then some of you don't have solar and you're wondering, how do I get solar before NEM 3 takes effect? It's kind of the same thing as what we've been saying. You want to, by April 14th, you have to have the following submitted to your utility. A complete and correct interconnection application has got to get in, and that will include all of these things. And your solar company will be responsible for getting this in. And if you're doing the project yourself, then you don't have to worry about a signed contract. But if you are outsourcing it to a solar company, which is most of us, there will need to be a signed contract. And again, construction does not have to be completed by April 14th. You got to get the interconnection application in, and then you've got a little bit more time before the whole thing has to be done. But presumably you want to get it done because you want to make energy from the sun. All right. Some people have been asking us, all right, I don't have solar and I want to get it, or maybe I have solar and I want to get batteries, or I want to get solar and batteries. Can we help you do that? I want to invite people to use our consumer guide. This is the website. As I said at the outset of this webinar, we are going to email a recording of this webinar out, and we will include some of the links and information here. So if you're writing down furiously, just check your email tomorrow. If you registered for this webinar, then you will get an email tomorrow. And if you didn't, we're going to put a recording of the website of the webinar on our website. But our consumer guide has lots of articles about that give you tips on shopping around for a solar company, whether it's for getting solar or getting a battery. And then we have a help desk. You can just email us at info@solarrights.org. The one thing we will not do is we will not make product recommendations. It's just too many solar companies, too hard. You really got to do your own research. And so I will say just at the outset, just to put the bug in your ear, if you're shopping around for solar and or battery, please get 3 bids. Please just do yourself a favor and don't just go with one company. Get at least 3 companies to give you a bid. Don't make a decision at all if you feel pressured. I know that's a little bit counter to what we were saying before, where we're going, if you need this, you got to do it now. But this is a big decision. So do it if it feels right. And don't do it if you feel like you're under duress or someone's giving you a squeeze. And do your own research. You're going to see, many of you are probably seeing a lot of ads on Facebook or online. Sure, you can look at those ads, but my advice to you is use the methods that we have in our consumer guide to make a list of solar companies that you want to research, look them up, and just do your due diligence. And anyway, the consumer guide has got a bunch of articles that have a lot more than that, but I just wanted to put the bug in your ear, especially to get 3 bids. It's one of the best things that you can do to get yourself into a situation that you're going to feel good about. Okay, so that's the information I have about NEM 3 and how it impacts you. So I want to then move now to the what the path is going forward. But before I do that, one of the most common questions that we've been getting over the last couple of weeks is just, how did this happen? Why did this happen? I think many of you were involved in the campaign to stop this from happening. And it was, we've been told it was one of the biggest grassroots campaigns that California has seen in recent years. It's certainly more people got involved in this than any other proceeding in CPUC history. Nearly 200,000 people wrote, called, marched, testified. Most of the state's major newspapers sided with us. We worked side by side with 600 nonprofits and cities and schools. It was an extraordinary grassroots effort. And yet, almost nobody, in the scheme of it was saying slash net metering. And yet here we are. And so people are wondering, how could this happen? And how could this happen in a democratically run state with a supposedly green bent, with a governor that's supposedly green and all about helping with the climate change and all that kind of thing? Like why? I think a lot of people are just wondering that. And I felt like we got so many of that question that I want to just unpack that a little bit. And to do that, I got to do a little politics. So you got to forgive me, but I just want to give you an analysis because I think it is driving a lot of people crazy. And I think I understand why. So first off, here's the official reason that the CPUC gave for the decision that they made. I'm paraphrasing, but effectively what the CPUC is saying is, you solar users don't pay your fair share of the grid, and you are overpaid for that extra solar energy. And we can get that solar energy more cheaply from big solar and wind farms. So why would we want to pay you so much for it when you're not even paying your fair share to begin with? So this is the least we can do to make the system more fair so that people who don't have solar aren't subsidizing your solar. That's effectively what they were saying. And so I think if you're reasonable, you're probably, I think it's reasonable to kind of go, okay, well, is there any truth to that, right? I think that's a fair question to ask. And I think we've done our own due diligence and we would say, no, there isn't. It's nonsense. And in the follow-up email that I'm going to send out that includes the recording, I'm going to include some resources for you so that you can do your own homework if you haven't done that yet. So you can just decide for yourself whether you think this has merit or not. But our position is it has no merit. And because I'm going to send you some detailed information that actually has studies and facts and all that kind of stuff, I felt like it was okay to give you the short version of why what they're saying is nonsense, which is a cartoon, which I normally wouldn't do because I feel like we're adults here and you want to have actually like facts. But I think this captures in a nutshell why what they're saying is nonsense. So you see in the background there, those power lines. That's why everyone's paying so much in utility bills, is long distance, not the power lines in your neighborhood, but the long distance power lines that connect the energy that's far away into our cities and towns. Those are the same power lines that cause the fires, the same power lines that when they go down, we have to experience blackouts, and why we had, flex alerts and all that kind of stuff. They're incredibly expensive. They're what's driving up utility rates. And not coincidentally, they're how the utilities make their profit, because the government lets them, not only do you have to pay for those power lines through your rates, but the government lets the utilities tack on a 7 to 12% profit, 10% on average. Just tack on a 10% guaranteed profit on top of what, on top of every dollar that they spend building and maintaining those power lines. They are effectively incentivized to spend as much of your money as possible building and maintaining power lines, because they can just then grab another 10% profit off it. What business gets to do that? Utilities in California get to do that. And it's created so many problems, right? Fires and blackouts and unsustainable utility bills that are, literally making it that people have to choose between buying their groceries and paying their utility. They have to find a scapegoat, and they found one in rooftop solar. And so we are effectively a scapegoat for a problem that was created by the utilities and bad regulation by the CPUC and their current business model. Like I said, I'm going to send out, as part of, for anyone that registered, the details, and people who have been involved in this campaign know that we have been giving those details out. But this is really what's going on. So that's the merits of the whole thing. So then you're wondering, okay, so if they're wrong, why couldn't we convince the governor and the CPUC otherwise? And so that's where it's politics. The utility industry spent $56 million on campaign contributions and lobbying since 2017 at every level of government in California. And that includes PG&E, Edison, and San Diego Gas and Electric, but it also includes their labor union. I want to just say up front here that we don't have a dog to pick with labor unions. Okay, like there's no problem here. But what we are going to call out is this one very particular labor union is joined at the hip with PG&E and the other utilities, and they do their dirty work. And in a democratic state like California, this particular labor union is one of the most powerful. And that's the secret weapon for the utilities. So you can wonder, well, how can PG&E possibly have power after they've done all of these things? They don't have to be the ones to do the dirty work. They've got a labor union to do it. So it's a combination of the utilities themselves spend enormous amounts of money on politicians. And then they've got this secret weapon in this very particular state where that matters. And so I want to just share with you, this is the contract between PG&E and their labor union. It's called a collective bargaining agreement. And in section 7, and we're going to send this to out because you'll be wondering, there is language in there that I'm going to paraphrase here, but essentially it says that the union is bound by contract to work together with PG&E to defend PG&E against competitive challenges to PG&E's business model. And it doesn't say it explicitly, but it alludes to very, very strongly that among those competitive challenges is your rooftop solar. And then if you have any more doubt about just how this all plays out, this is the night that Governor Newsom survived the recall. And I should just go back and call out the headline here. The union gave $5 million to Governor Newsom's recall campaign. They worked really hard to keep him from getting recalled. I'm not making a statement about whether he should have been recalled or not. I'm just giving you the politics of it. This is the night that he won. And where did he make his victory speech? Look behind his head. It was in an IBEW hall. That's the same utility that we're talking about here. Or sorry, the same union. And so it's this collusion between the utilities and their union that gives them so much power, so that even though the argument to shrink rooftop solar holds no merit, there was enough power and politics behind it to give it juice and make Governor Newsom feel like he had to give the utilities a pound of flesh. So that's the bad news. I want to kind of come back though to, given that all the power that was stacked against us, stopping the solar tax and keeping that out of NEM 3 is a really, 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 really big deal. It's a really, really big deal. The fact that we protected your existing investments, your lock-in period from getting opened up is a really big deal. When this whole thing initially started, most of the conventional wisdom inside Sacramento was that the solar tax was going to happen and your existing investments were going to get screwed. And obviously we don't like NEM3 at all, but I don't really, it's very hard to describe how bad it would have been if the solar tax had passed. First off, if they had opened up your lock-in period, nobody would ever go solar ever again, right? It would have been just the ultimate broken agreement. And so by keeping that, we've at least established, hopefully once and for all, that you don't go after existing investments. You just don't go back on those agreements. But the solar tax is an even bigger deal because 10 years from now, even 5 years from now, it's hard to say exactly when, the future is going to be that everyone who has solar is going to have a battery. Now, batteries are too expensive for a lot of people, so it's, it's very, very early. But it's very likely that in some period of time in the near future, everyone who has solar has a battery, which means that extra energy that you make, you're just going to store right there in the battery. And when the sun's not shining, you'll just draw that energy from the battery. And because that is going to be the way it's going to work, then who cares if you don't get any, if the utility doesn't pay you for the extra energy you give back to the grid? You're not going to give any energy back to the grid. You're just going to store it at home, which means that you won't ever have to buy the utility's energy at night because you'll just store it, or you won't have to buy very much of it. And when that point happens, and people who have batteries know this already, utilities monopoly is over. I mean, I believe actually the utilities do have a role in California to play. And I think there's poles and wires that have to get maintained. We probably do need solar and wind farms to some degree. So I'm not about throwing the baby out with the bathwater. My interest is just this monopoly has got to be broken because there's a better way to do things. And once solar and batteries become something that everyone can afford, then it's game over for the utilities. They just have no leverage on you anymore. And they know that. So that's why they wanted the solar tax. Because if you had to pay a tax just for putting solar panels on your rooftop, then why would you get solar and a battery? You're going to have to pay anyway. We kept that off the table. You kept that off the table. And we're going to have to keep that off the table because they're going to keep coming back and they're going to want to keep charging that solar tax. That's really what they want. And so given the enormous amount of power that was stacked against us, you should be darn proud of yourself. And I know that's hard to say because NEM3 is yucky and we don't like it, but just keep your eye on the prize. And, we can get through this next period. The future is very, very bright for, the people. And so our vision is the same. It's always has been. Everyone has the right to make solar energy without utility or government obstacles. And we envision a future where millions of people, whether you're a homeowner or a renter or a farmer or a business or school or church or what have you, that you could have solar and a battery and for the benefit of yourself and your community and so forth. So the path from here. I want to just discuss a little bit, and then I'm going to hand over to Kaylee to just dive in a little bit more what our plans are, at least for this year. And, we hope that you join, we can work together again on these things. So first, we have to play defense. Utilities are going to come back. They're going to try to do solar tax again, probably. They're going to probably try some other ways to kind of erode your lock-in period in some way. And we're just going to have to play defense. Now, a lot of people have kind of said, I'm tired of playing defense. The best defense is the best defense is a good offense. Let's go on the offensive. We should do that too, but there is no shame in playing defense given the stakes. If 10 years from now, the only thing that we've accomplished is we kept the solar tax off the table and we protected existing investments, then I believe that will be an accomplishment that we should be proud of. That said, I think we can probably do better than that. So the next thing is we want to reverse or modify NEM3 if possible. I say if possible because nothing is off the table, but it's not easy, I should say, and it may not be possible, but we're continuing to look for every possible way. And I want to discuss that in a little bit more detail in just a moment. There are some ways that we can make batteries cheaper more quickly. I think eventually batteries will be something that's more ubiquitous and cheap and something that everyday people can get. But if you're like me, I think technology and entrepreneurialism will take us a long way. But if we can accelerate that through policy, so that then we marry policy, technology, and entrepreneurialism, so that rather than waiting 10 years, cheaper batteries can come in 5 years. I'd like to do that. And I would hope that you do too. Then there's red tape. Kaylee's going to talk about this some more, but I was flabbergasted to learn that solar is twice as expensive in America than it is in other developed countries like Germany and Japan. And it turns out the reason why is that the system for getting a permit and connecting your solar to the grid is so much more bureaucratic here in America than it is in these other countries, that actually is the difference, is just all the little bureaucratic stuff that you don't see, but your solar company has to do. And then those costs get passed on to the consumer. So there's a couple of very simple ways that we can cut that red tape. And I'm really hot on, wanting to do that. And I hope that you can join. And in fact, there's some really easy things that you can do to make this happen in your own community. So a word on defense. This March, the CPUC is going to pick up another proceeding that's going to be ostensibly about charging all ratepayers a higher fixed charge. So this isn't going to specifically target solar, but we're going to watch it anyway because we think the utilities are going to try and slip their solar tax in here. And I think we're gonna get involved in this thing anyway because we don't want that fixed charge to be too high. Because if it's too high, even if it's not specifically targeted at solar, it's going to make it hard for solar and batteries to pencil out. It's the same principle. They're going to make us pay even if we don't use the grid. And so we're going to pay attention to that. And then we're going to pay attention to the legislature. For anyone that's been around, twice we've had to defend against a solar tax bill in the legislature. Twice you helped to defeat it. So you can expect that the legislature's things are going to surface at very inconvenient times. We're going to keep track of that. In terms of reversing NEM 3, an appeal has been filed. We did not file it. There is a couple of other nonprofits that have been allies of ours all along in this fight. They have some very, very, very smart lawyers on their staff, and they have filed an appeal. We are watching it very, very closely. We are talking to them a lot, and we have written a summary of that appeal, as well as you can link and read the entire appeal on our website. Again, I'm going to email all this out. So if you registered for the webinar, it's there. And you can actually see this if you scroll down to the bottom of our homepage. This is one of our top links right now, and you can learn more about it. In terms of a ballot measure, I would just say this: nothing is off the table. One of the things that we would need in order to be able to put a ballot measure in motion would be money, quite a lot of it. To run a viable ballot measure, you probably need to, ultimately have about $30 to $40 million. And that's not impossible, but it does require a couple of first movers who are able to do, initial donations of around between $500,000 and $3 million to get the thing off the ground. If you are in the audience and you're one of those people who either has that kind of giving capacity or of people who might, then contact me. And we can have a discreet conversation, very private, and just explore it, no guarantees. But we're doing those conversations right now. And like I said, nothing is off the table. It's just, if you're going to do it, you got to do it right. I've been involved in ballot measures in the past, and it's not something that you take lightly. So in the meantime, the main thing that's on the table here is the appeal. And so then on batteries, then here's what I would say about this is that the legislature may, as I was saying earlier, might be talking about doing a rebate. I am not, what's being proposed right now is not all that awesome, but I think we want to push anything on this. Like if there's an opportunity for a rebate that would buy down the cost of a battery for lots and lots of people, I have no problem. And I think I would like you to work with us to push it to the maximum extent possible. So this is going to be one of these things where we just want to pay attention to it, but it's a little unclear right now what's exactly going to happen this year. So it's just to say that's on the table. If we can look for ways to establish rebates that would buy down the cost of batteries for people initially, while we're waiting for the technology to really kind of get it down the market, then I think we'd like that. And so we're going to be looking for those opportunities. Before we turn it over to Kaylee to talk about red tape, I want to do a save the date. While there's a lot that's still up in the air, we do know that probably by the middle of this year, there's a lot of things that are going to be going on in the legislature with respect to both defense and offense. And so we have scheduled an all-day lobby day at the state capitol in Sacramento on June 6th. It's a Tuesday, and it's never too early to register. So we invite you to sign up. And the only thing I can say is it's on June 6th. It's going to be all day. It'll probably start at 8 a.m. And you'll have a chance to meet face-to-face with either your legislator or one of their staff. I can guarantee you there will be lots of things by that point that they should be hearing from their constituents about. And there's nothing like an in-person opportunity. So even if you live way down south and it's a big trip, think about it. And, there's many other things that you can do besides this, but this is the first lobby day that we're doing since the pandemic. So I personally am really excited to just have a lot of people come together and do something like this. And so I want to put that out there, save the date. And then with that, I'd like to turn it over to Kaylee to just do a little bit of an in-depth on the program that we're launching to cut solar red tape at the local level.
So hi again, folks. For anyone who came late, my name is Kaylee Underhill, and I am the Advocacy and Development Director with the Solar Rights Alliance. And as Dave mentioned before, one of the biggest obstacles to solar growth is the cost and the time that it takes to get a permit from the city to install solar panels. And as Dave also mentioned, it's twice as expensive in the US to go solar than it is in many other developed countries like Germany and Japan. And that's particularly a problem in California because the permitting requirements drive up the cost of going solar here. And I want to pause here and just say, permits are a good thing. They ensure safety. We definitely need them and want them, but outdated permitting requirements that are combined with backlogs and staffing shortages can add months of delays and thousands of dollars to really routine rooftop solar projects. And the good news is that we have a really simple solution. If we just streamline that permitting process, we can cut the red tape and just make it easier for you and your neighbors to install solar panels and batteries. And it can actually have a really profound impact. When San Jose streamlined their permitting process, they saw a 6-fold increase in solar adoption. Just imagine what a 6-fold increase in solar adoption would look like in your city. And the great news is that we have a really simple way to do this. It's called Solar App Plus. Solar App Plus is not an application. It is a really robust software system, and it stands for Solar Automated Permitting Platform Plus. And it's software that cities can use to issue code-compliant permits automatically for homes that, hit the checklist. And it was developed by the Federal Department of Energy in conjunction with the International Association of Electrical Inspectors and the National Fire Protection Association. So all the folks you'd want to be involved in a project like this were involved here. And Solar App Plus is already in use in more than 20 jurisdictions across the state of California. And Solar App permits pass inspection at a rate that is at or better than traditional permitting systems. So Solar App Plus is super easy for cities to use and install. It's safe and it's free for cities to use. And as of recently, it's also the law. So a recent law was passed, Senate Bill 379, better known as the Solar Access Act, that said that building departments have a year, just about, to transition to Solar App Plus or an equivalent permitting platform. And that's great. It's a really good start. We were part of this initiative. We're really excited about this law. But that 1-year delay is a long time. It can mean hundreds of thousands of dollars in fees to folks who want to go solar. It can mean months and months of bureaucratic backlogs and headaches, and it means more dirty energy pumping into our air. The great news is that this is not an unfunded mandate. Grants are available to cover the work hours necessary to adopt it, but there's a limited amount of funds. So it's super urgent that cities get involved in this as quickly as they can. And all your city council needs to do is choose to use it. That's it. They just need to choose to switch over to Solar App Plus or an equivalent system. And we need your help to make sure that they do. So I worked with a team of dedicated and awesome volunteers to run a pilot project around this concept, and it was very successful. We found that for a city to adopt Solar App Plus, it didn't take a movement of hundreds of thousands of people. It took like 2 or 3. And we came up with a really simple 3-step process to help cities adopt this system. Step 1 is just heading to your local city council meeting and making a 60-second statement in favor of Solar App Plus during the public comment period. Really simple, really easy, and we even designed a tool to help you figure out what to say if you're not sure where to start. Step 2, after you've said something at a city council meeting and maybe brought some friends to say something too, is to email all the city council members and ask them if they'd be willing to meet with you to talk about adopting Solar App Plus. And if they do, and they say yes, great. Then step 3 is to celebrate and to, announce that with letters to the editor, post it on social media, and thank them at the next city council meeting for what they've done. And again, we've got toolkits for sending out that email. We've got toolkits for the meeting agenda. We've got everything you need to be successful. And if they say no, then that leads us to step 3B, which is building a movement around it. So getting out there with some petitions, and we can help you do that too, and get you the training that you need to be successful. And again, when we've done this in our pilot campaign, we saw a ton of success. So it's a really exciting thing we can do that can have a huge real impact right where you live. So if you're excited about this and you want to make it faster and easier for folks to go solar in your city, please email me. We've got my email right there. It's kaylee@solarrights.org. I would love to hear from you wherever you are, and I'm happy to work with you wherever you are to make it a reality for people to get solar more easily, more quickly, and more cheaply. And I really hope to hear from a lot of the folks out there. We're excited about this.
All right. Thank you, Kaylee. We're really excited that Kaylee has joined the team here, and this is going to be a really great year. I think we're going to get a lot done. Okay, so I just want to reiterate the Solar Lobby Day. Sign up. Again, if you registered, we're going to email all this out. This will be a link on our website as well. And again, if you can't do this, I think if you've been around a while, anything you do is great, right? Like little, big, in the middle. Many voices have a lot of power, and many hands make work light. So if you have additional questions, then these are ways you can contact us. This information is also at the bottom of our website, and it's at the bottom of, I think, most emails that we send. So what I'd like to do now with the time that we have remaining is we're going to take some questions. We've got people have sent us a lot of questions in advance. I see that there's a lot of questions in the Q&A. Of course, we're not going to have time to address every single question. We will try to email people individually if we didn't get to your question and we feel like we didn't cover it in this webinar. You can obviously also email us, and we'll do our best to get back to you. This is a big priority for us, is to get information out. But let's start with a couple of questions, and Kaylee's been the keeper of the questions that we ought to handle here. So what do we got?
All right, Dave. Well, a lot of folks have written in with some variation of the question, should I get a battery? What do you think?
I don't know if you should get a battery or not, but the way that you can figure it out is I would definitely look at the article that we have on this on our consumer guide. If you just go to solarrights.org, there's a button at the top that says consumer guide, and there's a list of articles. And one of them is about, how do I figure out if I want to get a battery? It's got a method that you can use. If you have additional questions, send us an email. I have a question actually for you, the audience, everyone here who's listening, which is, would you want us to do a webinar just devoted to batteries? We did this in 2019 before the pandemic, and we actually brought on solar companies that install batteries. And so you could actually ask them questions, and obviously we do some impartial stuff as well. So I'm wondering if can we do maybe a poll to just see if we held a webinar on getting batteries, would you want us to do that? So let's keep that poll open. I love this poll feature. And while that's happening, let's move on to the next question.
Sounds good. So that'll stay up, folks, there on your screens for a little bit and then go away when you answer it. So please submit your answer there. So Brian asked, for people getting solar now or people who recently got it, what are the best rate plans if you don't have a battery system? And what is the best rate plan if you do add a battery system?
Yeah. Again, it's hard to say, every situation is different. I am always really hesitant to kind of generically say things, but I think in this particular case, if you have a solar and a battery, then it might be the case that you would benefit from one of those plans where sometimes they call it an electrification rate or, whatever, where the evening electricity rates are particularly high. And the main reason why is because you're not going to be paying those evening electricity rates because you'll be storing the energy in a battery. And you might even get some benefit from it because then if your battery is super full and you're not going to need all of it, you could configure the battery to export some of that excess energy from your battery into the grid and get more money, for it. So you should talk to your solar installer. They generally have a good handle on like what's going to be the best return on investment for you. If you don't have a battery, then it's almost the opposite. What you want to do is try to find a plan where there's the least amount of difference between daytime rates and evening rates, because you want to get maximum value for the solar that you're exporting to the grid during the day, and you want to pay as little as possible to the utility during those peak times. Now, every utility is moving. They want rates where there is a big difference between those two. And so you're not going to find the perfect option, and the utility will automatically put you on a new plan without asking you first usually, but you can call them and then ask them for all their plans and then switch to the one that works the best for you. So that's generic rule of thumb. And you might want to call your solar company if you have questions about that.
Sounds good. So on a separate topic, Karen said, I live in Fresno and PG&E has never paid me 30 cents per kilowatt hour for my solar energy if I have a credit at TrueUp. PG&E has always paid 4 cents per kilowatt hour when I have a credit at TrueUp. Please explain this discrepancy between what you are telling the public and what has always been my experience in these 13 years of having solar on my roof.
Yeah, Karen, this is a very, very common question. So let me explain it. So what you're experiencing at TrueUp, and TrueUp, by the way, is the statement that you get on the anniversary of the day that your system turned on. What you're experiencing at TrueUp is absolutely the case. But here's what's confusing about it. Any other time of the year outside of TrueUp, you are absolutely getting credited at the retail rate, whatever the price of electricity is at that time of day that you are exporting extra energy to the grid, you are absolutely getting the retail rate. And it goes into a little piggy bank that is invisible to you, but it's there. And then when you buy extra energy, when you buy energy from the grid, when the sun's not shining, that any credits that you have at that particular point get applied in that way. And that happens every day of the year, every hour, every day, all year. And then at TrueUp, at again, the anniversary of the day that your system turned on, if you have a surplus by that point, then the utility cashes you out, not at the retail rate, but at a much smaller rate that's around 4 or 5 cents. And then you start all over again, you reset. The reason why this is confusing is because the TrueUp statement is usually the clearest thing that the utility sends you. And then anyone who's experienced the monthly statements that you get from the utility, it's like, a different planet altogether. It's very hard to decipher. And so I think many people are under the impression that you're only ever getting 4 or 5 cents, but that's not the case. And if you really are, not sure, we can go over your utility bill with you, or you better yet call your solar company and have them go over your utility bill with you. But so that's what's going on. And this is a very, very common question. I wish the utilities made their bills simpler, but I'm sure they have some reason why, doing that would undermine their monopoly and all the other kind of things that they do. But I digress.
Sounds about right. So Tom shared that he has solar panels and he's interested in adding more. And he's wondering, can I add the panels and get the federal/state tax rebates? How does that work?
Yeah, so there are federal tax credits and rebates now. There's more than ever, I think, as you might have heard. And of course, I can't, I'm not your accountant, so I don't know, Tom, exactly your situation. But it is the case that these tax credits apply even if you're expanding your system or you're, getting a battery. They also can apply if you have to upgrade your electrical panel. They're pretty good, but there's all kinds of little rules here and there that might make your situation not eligible for these tax advantages. So you need to talk to an accountant. If you have an accountant, call them. If you don't have an accountant, find an accountant and call them. I wish I could give you a stock answer, but it's just, I've seen people get tripped up on this thing. And so I just would advise you to talk to an accountant. But I think the answer is yes, probably. And I think that's your starting point, is like, get an accountant to explain to you why the answer would be no, and then assume that it'll be yes if on that kind of thing. By the way, there is an organization that's called Rewiring America, and they've got some excellent consumer resources about all these federal tax breaks that are coming up for solar and other kinds of things. And so you could Google Rewiring America, and there's some good information there as well. But again, if you want to kind of really get down to your specific situation, talking to an accountant is a good idea.
All right. And so many folks shared that they might want to get an electric vehicle, but they haven't decided or they're not sure yet. And so they're wondering if they can install more panels than they would currently use in anticipation of getting an electric vehicle later on. What are your thoughts on that, Dave?
Yeah, so obviously this will be the reason why you'd want to add more panels. Some people will add more panels because they're already using more electricity than when they originally installed their solar. Other people are thinking just what is going on here, that like I'm thinking of getting an electric car or a heat pump or whatever. And so you want to kind of plan for that day. And especially now that the clock is ticking, if you want to do it, you kind of got to do it now. Otherwise, you're going to get switched to NEM 3. So here's the thing. You can what's called oversize your system. You can make it bigger, generate more energy than what is your actual electrical load, but only if you can prove in a year's time that you have actually increased your electrical load. You have to show proof that you've done that. If you haven't, then you can run into trouble. And you don't want to run into trouble. It's a little unclear exactly what the implications are, and this is where you got to talk to a solar installer. And by the way, I think this is crazy that that's the case, because, I think many of us are kind of thinking, I'd like to get an electric car, maybe down the road, then a heat pump. These things are really expensive. So it's not like people are going to get it right away. And yet the CPUC has made it that like, if you kind of got to do it right away, unless you're going to be, or else you're going to get switched to NEM 3. And so it's just another example of how the rules are not set up to take into account how everyday people actually live their lives. But nonetheless, that's the way it is. So yes, you can oversize your system as long as you're oversizing it to meet a load that you can confidently say that you can prove in about a year's time.
And then I think since we're just past 7 o'clock here, probably this is the last question that we have time for this evening. Mark asked, are you required to grid tie your solar installation, or can you have it installed so that it is only used to power your home?
Sure. Yeah. If you want to go off grid, like literally off grid, there's no law that stops you from doing that. Obviously, if you're going to do that, then, you want to make sure you know what you're doing, and, either really know what you're doing or hire someone who knows what they're doing. Sure. Yeah, there's no reason you can't do that. And, I think certainly we intended to defend everyone's right to do that kind of thing. And, regardless of whether you want to be on the grid or off grid, we think you have a right to make and share and store energy without, the utility crawling into your business. And so we're going to be defending that right to do so. So yeah, you can totally do that. Again, just be careful, like make sure you know what you're doing. Because once you're off grid, then there's no grid that you can pull your energy from.
And then I think just to sort of close us out here, we do have the results of our battery webinar poll. So I'll go ahead and share those with folks. Here they are.
All right, looks like we're doing a webinar on batteries. All right,
clear.
This is great feedback, folks. Thanks for doing it. We will, Kaylee and I will then just, get a date on the calendar and figure out what to do with it. And if you have particular, and we'll do the same thing when we advertise the webinar, we'll ask you we'll solicit your questions, and that'll help us shape the content of the event. Okay, so I think we promised that this was going to be an hour. We're a little over the hour. It seems like people are still on, so they will forgive us for that. Again, I want to just close with a really, really big thank you to you. This is not the webinar that I wanted to do. When we were back in November and December, and we were staring down the CPUC decision. But I am just so impressed. Again, more than 200,000 people spoke up on this campaign, not just once, but repeatedly. For those of you that were around with us in August, you will recall that the utilities tried to slip in a solar tax literally 2 days before the legislature was going to, adjourn. And in 4 hours time, you all flooded your legislators' offices with so many phone calls that the sponsors of that solar tax provision took it out. And, we got numerous feedback that legislators were getting like 500 phone calls or more from their constituents. That's you. So we're going to have to keep doing this. We're going to have to keep trying to make gains. And obviously, we want to make sure that first and foremost, you're protecting yourself and your family and your community. And so, good work, everyone. And again, I'm going to just repeat, we're going to send a recording out to anyone who registered. We'll include some of the additional links and information that we've been referencing as well. It will probably be sometime tomorrow that this goes out. And we will also post the recording to the website in case you didn't register and you're just wondering how you're going to get it. All right, so for that, Kaylee, is there anything else that I'm forgetting?
I think we are all set for the time being. Just want to say again, folks, if you felt your question wasn't answered or you have some sort of specific scenario that you'd like some help with, please email us, info@solarrights.org. As Dave said, we're working really hard to make sure that we do our best to answer every question, respond to every call. So if you have a question and we didn't answer it, there are quite a number of questions in the Q&A and hundreds poured in prior to the webinar. Please send it to us and we will do our best to get a response to you.
Fabulous. All right, everyone, have a good evening and a good weekend. Good night.
Thanks, folks.